Okay, thank you, Rochelle. We might want to, I'm going to be delivering a presentation, so I think for ease of viewing the slides, if we can turn the lights down, please. Can we start? Just 1 second, please. I want to get the. Okay. Okay, so while we wait to get the presentation back to the very beginning, again, I would like to adopt the protocols that have been established. And again, I hope we have sort of discovered the theme of the launch of this digital inclusion survey. We all know that the whole world is now digital, and we do not want to be left back, which means that every citizen needs to be included in this digital transformation. But there are some key areas that must be addressed in order for that to be successful. Today, what we would like to do is to essentially present to the public some of the major findings of the survey. We will have the report published on our website, and the data that we have collected will also be made available at a later date. So today, what we are giving you is really just a glimpse at the findings. And I think some of the points made by Mr. Williams of the OECS and the managing director when they spoke, it is important to note that what we are aiming for is to have evidence-based decision-making. We sometimes have a feeling that something is happening. We feel that everybody has access to ICTs. We believe that everybody has a phone and they can access all the services. All the people that we know personally can do several things online. And so we get a feeling that this is everybody. But in order for us to make decisions that are then helpful and transformative for the country as a whole, we need to know what is happening everywhere. And that is why it's very important to do these types of surveys. And again, we cannot underestimate the support provided by Mr. St. Catherine after his many, many, many years of experience in that area to do the type of survey that has the intellectual rigor that it stands up to years of being used. This is not something that we just use for today. This is something that will serve us for 3 to 5 years until we are able to do another survey. And again, I think the word snapshot was also used. That's another thing. We have to remember this is a moment in time. It tells us what is happening in that moment, where we were, where we are now, and then the challenge for us is how are we going to move forward. Okay, so we tested, but it's... Okay. So just to give a brief background, the survey was conducted across the 5 member states of ECTEL, so that is starting from St. Kitts and Nevis in the north, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Grenada. And it was done under the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, and as we said, implemented by the Data Point Solutions consulting firm. Across the member states, we surveyed both households and individuals over the age of 15. What we aim at getting, we wanted to get some information at the household level, and then, so the head of household would be asked specific questions, and then we wanted to know person's individual experience, because you may have a household and the persons within the household have various experiences with ICT. One of the first important things that we looked at is devices. One of the differences between broadband and data is that when we were focused mostly on voice as the main form of communications, we've really worried about the device. You got a device from the service provider and you were on your merry way. In order to participate in the new digital economy, you need additional devices. And so we wanted to find out from persons what device do they have at home that will allow them to access the internet or to access the digital economy. The most popular device that we found across most member states was the laptop. more than about 30% of persons, 40 to 50%, I would say, in fact, of persons indicated that the laptop was the main device they used in order to participate in the digital economy. The tablet was used by between 30 to 50%, and the desktop was less than 10%. And we all understand that there was a time the desktop was king, but laptops have become so powerful now that it just makes more sense for most persons to have a laptop. Then we wanted to find out, okay, you have a device, are you connected to the internet? Because these are separate things. You have to pay. These are two different services. It's going to cost you more money, A, to get the device, and then to actually get the service. And we are very, very excited and pleased to show that in the last 10 years, there has been a 100-fold increase in the number of households who are able to access the internet. When we did a similar survey around 2014, 2015, it was, except in the case of St. Kitts and Nevis, under 50%. In the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as low as 37% of households indicating that they had access to the internet. Now, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it's up to 87%. And so we can see that this has been a quantum leap forward. So we know that that is going to have a significant impact on the lives of those persons, and especially homes with children, where we know that the education system is now largely expecting that you are able to participate online. But we also just looked at, well, what is happening with the good old-fashioned devices that we are all used to, the radio, the television. And it was interesting to find out that more than 50% of people still have a radio at home. I being one of them. I still listen to the radio every day. That was down from 80% the last time that we were in the market. But again, we also now know that a lot of persons, you don't need a separate device as a radio, because now everything that's going on the radio, you can access that over your computer or your phone. Televisions have remained relatively robust. It moved from 87%, slight decline to about 82%, because again, we see the television now pretty much as an extension of our laptops for a lot of us. And in its own right, now the smart TVs will allow you to access the internet directly. And mobile phones, which were owned by about 89%, is now up to 95% of households. And then we say, okay, so we know that these persons say they have internet access. We want to know what technology are they using to access the internet, because we all know, again, that both at the fixed and the mobile level, the technology that is being offered by service providers have changed. Some of us, I hope we remember the days of the ADSL. The last time we were in the market, a majority of households accessed the internet via ADSL. Today, that has been converted to cable modem. And we have an interesting situation in the case of Dominica. So while for most of the member states, cable modem is the main technology used, in the case of Dominica, it's fiber to the home. And I think if those of us who have a memory of that year, 2017, will get an idea of why that is. Why is it that Dominica is able to have much more modern infrastructure than everybody else this year's hence, having to completely rebuild the infrastructure after the devastation of Maria in 2017. But it's not all good news. We note that if we say 87% of households have internet, it means that it's not 100%. What is considered universal international is at 95%. The aim is to get 95% of all households or all persons in your country to have internet access. So we have a little ways to go. We are almost there, but we have a little ways to go. So we asked persons who didn't have the internet, why don't you have the internet? What is the barrier? And I think we all know the first barrier for most persons were cost. For those households, more than 40% of those persons who said they didn't have internet at home right now, it was a matter of the cost of the service. But we also have a number of persons saying that they don't see the relevance of the service. They don't need it, they don't find it interesting, or they don't find it useful. And so we see opportunities here for policymakers to really do a little bit more soul searching to find out why is it that some persons don't think that they need the internet? Is it that we have, what have we missed in terms of our outreach? That is an area that we need to do a little bit of work. Then we also ask, well, if you don't have the internet, what would make you come on board? And again, a lot of people said if it was more affordable, but we still have a handful of persons, of those persons without internet, about a quarter of those persons, about 25% indicated, nah, we still don't want it. Even if it's not affordability, we just don't find it intriguing. And so again, that is an area for policymakers and regulators to do further investigation. And I should say that in general, that what we are presenting here is the problem, not the solution. Now that we know what is the state of affairs, we will then make some determinations as to what areas do we need to put our resources. We know we cannot tackle all problems all at once. We don't have that type of resources. So in order to be able to use our resources more strategically, we want to identify, and Imran said it very well, what is the experience of the persons on the ground? What are their concerns? What are the areas that we should be focusing the resources that we have on in order to ensure that they become participants in the digital economy? An area of interest is the quality of service or the quality of customer experience. We asked households, when you are making a decision about your broadband service, what it is that you take into consideration? This is going to be the theme of this whole presentation. The cost of the service was number one. Reliability of the service was number two, and about 15% of persons said they consider what is the maximum download speed. However, we found a very interesting stat that more than 70% of persons, when asked what is the download speed of your service, they did not know. So again, there is some education to be done around understanding that the service that you are buying, the service that you have, and understanding what it can do for you. Because sometimes your quality of service may be a case that the service that you have is not suitable for the activities that you are doing. So again, it's about educating the public so that they understand what they're buying, what the experience they can expect for that. Now, sometimes it's really just bad service, but we need to find out what we want to solve the correct problem. In general, we also just asked households to just identify, the top 3 problems that they have with their service, if they experience any difficulty. And the number 1 problem was slow browsing or slow speed of the internet. And again, we are saying this is all now linked to the fact that some persons don't even know what the speed should be. And so sometimes in order to make a complaint, you can't even really necessarily determine, well, is it that I don't have the speed? Is it that the service provider is not giving me the speed that I'm paying for? Or is it that I need more speed based on the number of persons or the number of services being used? But we also had persons complaining about things like frequent disruptions of service, poor customer support, billing inaccuracies, limited coverage in certain areas, as well as sort of unstable connectivity. So we have identified a number of these areas, and the aim is again to determine, now this is the experience of the customer, then we now need to look at it from the perspective of the service provider. What is the service that they're providing in certain areas to see if we can resolve some of these matters. Important for customers is their ability to complain if they have an issue with their service, be able to lodge a complaint with their service provider, and there is a process where if they are unable to come to a resolution with the service provider, that can be escalated to the NTRC, who has the mandate to address customer complaints. So here in the report, we gave the results of both the complaints submitted to service providers and NTRCs, but for the purpose of this presentation, we are looking at the service resolution or customer's satisfaction or customer's experience with regards to how complaints are resolved by the NTRCs. And what we have noted is that persons appeared to be more likely to complain about mobile broadband service other than fixed. We looked at mobile and fixed broadband service. But they were more likely to be satisfied with the solution when it came to fixed broadband. So they had more complaints about mobile service. They were happier with the resolution to fixed. So again, a gap here has to be filled. We need to find out what is the problem that persons are having with mobile broadband and how are we able to resolve it in a way that at the end of the day, they feel that the resolution was satisfactory. To talk a little bit about affordability in terms of what were the findings, what did persons say about the cost of the service to them and whether or not at that cost they found it affordable. In the case of fixed broadband, and this is what was reported, customers reported or households reported spending anywhere between $120 to $165 on fixed broadband per month. At the low end was St. Lucia, 120, and the higher end was Dominica. There wasn't a significant difference between persons who were in urban versus rural on how they addressed mobile versus, fixed broadband service. When we looked at mobile broadband, and in particular we focused on prepaid, but because that is still the majority of persons, although we have seen a steady uptick in persons switching over from prepaid to postpaid. It ranged from $78 to $147. Again, St. Lucia was on the low end at $78, and St. Kitts and Nevis on the higher end at $147. We have to recognize that affordability is not just the price, but the price relative to your income. And the target that has been set for affordability is about 2% of GNI per capita for our member states. And for most of the member states, that is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 50 EC. 50 EC dollars would be considered affordable in most of the member states except St. Kitts and Nevis. Because of the higher GNI per capita in St. Kitts and Nevis, that jumps to $100. You heard the numbers that I called out. None of them were anywhere in the neighborhood of 50. Even in the case of St. Kitts, it was 137. So again, we are seeing that there is an affordability gap that has to be addressed by the policies and regulations that we will work on in the next few years. Because that has been the theme, that has been one of the themes of this, the DIS, that affordability is a major challenge. Okay. So now that we know how much persons actually spend, or at least how much they have reported that they spent, we then ask them, well, do you find, based on what you're spending, do you find the service affordable? We included mobile voice in addition to both mobile and fixed broadband. For mobile voice, most persons indicated that they thought the service was affordable, over 50%. In the case of St. Kitts and Nevis, it was closer to almost 70%. But again, this drops when you ask them, do you believe that the price that you're at the price you're paying, do you believe that mobile or fixed broadband services are affordable? And it very quickly drops to below 50%. Except, I think, in the case of St. Vincent and Grenada, around 50, just over 50% said that they thought fixed broadband was affordable. So this is the worrying trend that we see, that persons do not believe that the prices that are being charged for these services are affordable. We did ask persons who have children, do you find the service affordable? And again, full disclosure, we are reporting everything we find. There was a slight uptick. And again, we believe if you have a household with small children, you are probably willing, not that you want to pay it, but you are maybe more willing to spend a little bit more money on something like broadband service because you know for your child it is an essential service. It is important for their education. But it still didn't get anywhere near something like 60%. So it is something that we have a challenge with. So that takes us to the end of the section of the report where we were discussing at the household level. Then within the households, we ask individuals, and for individuals, we focus now on use. What do you use the internet for? And you will notice that we have a few posters here so that you can take a look at after with some of the major findings for those persons who are present. I think we would have mentioned that a number of persons are actually participating online because this is meant to be an inclusive activity where all persons in all 5 member states and beyond are able to get the information on the survey all at the same time. So this slide just gives you an idea of the demographic information for the persons that were asked. So we looked at persons in terms of, we looked at age, we looked at sex, we looked at education, we looked at employment status when we are doing these surveys, and so all the data will be also reported using those categories. When it comes to personal use, something that is very important is whether or not you own a mobile phone. As we said, at the household level, we looked at, do you have a computer, do you have a desktop, do you have a laptop, because these are generally considered sort of shared or easily shared devices. In order for individuals to truly participate, we know that the mobile phone is probably the most practical device. So the question is, do you own a mobile phone? And then sometimes, while they don't own a mobile phone, they may be able to use one because somebody in the household or a friend or somebody who is helpful. So we all ask the question, do you own as well as do you use? And what we note is that a very significant percentage, well more than 90% in most member states, a little over 70 in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, indicated that they own a mobile phone and that they use a mobile phone. But then we ask, what do you we then ask ourselves, well, what do you use the mobile phone for? Because you could have a mobile phone and just have it. Because again, you have the phone, that's one cost. Then the service, that's an additional cost. The phone doesn't come loaded with, data and such. So we want to know, although you have a phone, are you able to use it? And 93% of persons indicated that they have been able to use the mobile phone for internet access. Now, that means that we have what you call a 7% usage gap. Persons who could use the internet, because we don't have anybody saying that they are not able to use the internet because it's not available, but we have persons here who, because everybody who was asked this question have a mobile phone. So you have a phone, but 7% of those persons are not using it to get onto the internet. And so we asked the barriers for those persons and why are you not using it? And again, it was back to cost. The cost was the main barrier for persons who indicated they were not using it to get onto the internet. And for some persons, a very small percentage, they indicated they just preferred to use a laptop or a desktop when it comes to internet access. But something we also want to point out here is that this 93% is again at the individual level a significant jump from roughly about 40% in 2014. So in 2014, when we asked persons, do you use your mobile phone to get on the internet? Only about 40% did. Now, we've had smartphones for a very long time, so we sometimes forget that there was a time when most persons didn't actually have a smartphone. And so that might also help in terms of having a smartphone being so much more readily available, makes it easier to use it as a device for your mobile service. Then we asked persons, what service do you use in order to get access to mobile? And this is where, again, the cost issue should raise its head. Because and this question, we ask you, what is the main? So you use several ways to get online, but what is the most, if you're going to use online, 9 out of 10, what would you use? And the answer was Wi-Fi. So while people are using the mobile phones, they're not actively rushing out there to buy data packages. Between 30 to 50% said that they were using Wi-Fis, whereas another 20 to 30% said, well, I will use my data if I cannot find Wi-Fi. So they're willing to use their data, but that's only if Wi-Fi is not available. And only 20% of persons indicated that their primary way of using their mobile phone online was through a data package. We're not saying that we want you to use a data package over Wi-Fi or any, we don't have a preference, but we all know that Wi-Fi is not as widely available as if you have a data package on your phone. You have to find out where is the Wi-Fi hotspot. You have to be on a hunt to find Wi-Fi. And so it is a concern that, again, due to cost, persons are making essentially sort of suboptimal decisions when they access the internet. Now we are looking a little bit now at, we are heading towards the idea of skills. So one of the things that we ask everybody is, do you have, what devices do you use? And we had a scenario where quite a few persons, as high as 50% in Dominica, said they don't use any ICT device. Now this is a non-mobile ICT device. So again, we asked the household, but again, within the household, there may be a laptop, but not everybody in the household uses the laptop, because again, you have different age ranges, different skills, different, maybe the kids are the ones using the laptop, but the parents are not. So we want to get an idea as to who is using those devices. Just because it's in the home doesn't mean everybody is using it. And that is what we have found out. So while the devices are available, 50% of persons in Dominica said they did not use the device. St. Lucia was one of the highest uses of device. Only 15% said that they did not use a device. Age was a factor. We found it was persons over 50 were more likely to say that they didn't use a device than persons who were younger. And again, the device of choice was again either the tablet or the laptop. Then we asked, well, what do you do on the device? What are the skills that you have when you use those devices? And I believe Imran gave a very good presentation on where we are with skills, because the OECS is very focused on the issue of digital skills. What we found is that more than 60% of persons said they had at least one basic skill, which means you could open a file, you could save a document, you could do some basic things that you need to do. But again, to use his words, once the skill ramps up, you get a drop off, fall off a cliff's edge. That dropped to less than 20% when you started asking persons, can you install software? Can you configure software? Can you troubleshoot something, if you are using your computer? And then it's just almost non-existent when we get into things like, can you write a computer program? So we have a significant skills gap in the ECTEL member states when it comes to ICT skills. We don't just want people to use the internet. We want them to use it for productive means, and it means that we have to address this skills gap. And then we started just asking about, okay, well, where do you use the internet? When do you use the internet? Just to get a feel for what is the relationship and how inclusive, because again, this is about digital inclusion. If you have the internet, but you can only use it when you are at school, or you can only use it because your neighbor allowed you to log on to their Wi-Fi, then that is not inclusion. Inclusion means that each person is able to make a decision when they want to access the internet, how they want to access it, and they simply make a decision because they have the device, they have access to the service, and it's their personal decision how they want to do it. It's not dependent on a whole host of other factors like finding a Wi-Fi hotspot. So we asked by location, where do you use the internet? And what was very happy news is that more than 90% of persons said that they used the internet at home. Other options were using internet at work. There were quite a significant number of persons, more than 60% said that they use internet at work, and also at the premises of other persons, because again, sometimes, in communities where persons have, good community relations, I know children who, would use internet because they are going to a neighbor's home who is allowing them essentially to use the internet. I know persons who said they've left their Wi-Fi password open for persons in their vicinity to be able to use their internet. But we were happy to see that more than 90% of persons said that they are able to use the internet at home. Likewise, 92% of persons said that they are able to use the internet daily rather than weekly or less frequently. So these are very happy statistics that we are able to discuss at this moment. Sorry, I think my slide was a bit delayed. So this is about location and frequency. So we ask whether you use it daily, weekly, or once in a while. Then how do you access the internet? Because there are several ways that you could access the internet. And again, number one was mobile phone via Wi-Fi. Then number two, mobile phone via data plan. So more than 80% of persons, between 70 and 80% of persons indicated that they using Wi-Fi was their main mode of using the internet. Somewhere between 30 and 50 said using a data plan. And then about 20% using a tablet, and only about 10% said that the desktop was the sort of main way that they would access the internet. Then what do you do online? That is another area of concern, because what we would like to see is more and more people. We know that people are using it for, a lot of entrepreneurs are taking advantage of the use of the internet, but we still find that the most common use is social media, communication, sending emails, and communications. And again, it's an area for retooling and ensuring that we identify, well, what are the concerns? One of the areas that we were interested in is e-commerce, and we have a slide. I just wanted to mention information sharing is also very important. And we know that that is one of the uses, but I think we would like to see more persons use the internet for, in some ways, gainful employment. So when we looked at e-commerce activity, only about 40% of persons indicated that they do actively use the internet for e-commerce. And we have to bear in mind, maybe something I should have said before, what we are normally asking is, it's something that you do usually, not something that you do once a year. We want to know, we ask you, have you done this in the last 3 months? We want to know that it is something that it's part of what you do. And we found that most persons do not use the internet for e-commerce. And when they did, the main items that were purchased were what you would expect, just household items. And another area of concern that we're looking at is mobile payments. The ECCB, again, in collaboration with the OECS under the same CADI project, did a financial inclusion survey, and the results were also, I wouldn't say concerning, but it showed that there is quite a bit of work to be done in the digital financial space. And again, I have to say again, Mr. St. Catherine also was, and his team, the Data Point Solutions, were the ones who also conducted that survey. So again, doing some very excellent work for us in the CARICOM in the OECS region. And for those persons who are not in the room, Mr. St. Catherine was the former director of statistics for St. Lucia, so he's well known throughout the Caribbean for his excellent work in that area. So we find that, again, the debit card is the main card used for payments, and sometimes the credit card. Very, very few people used other options in terms of mobile options. And we also know that some of the service providers who are offering these services, they are also having some struggles with, offering the service, and even maybe in persons being confident or feeling like, it's safe to use those services. The barriers for use of e-commerce, unfortunately, a lot of persons, more than 60% of those persons who didn't use e-commerce indicated that they were not interested in it at the moment, and for some persons, they prefer the in-person shopping experience. Not that we want people to do e-commerce. As I said, we are not here to promote any, but what we would like to know is that persons are able to participate in the digital economy freely the way they want to. That is really the policy initiative and the aim of the regulator, to make sure that there are no barriers to, so anybody who wants to access the internet, anybody who wants to participate in digital economy, you want to build a small business, you want to communicate with your family, it is cost effective, it is reliable, and you feel safe doing so. This slide maybe is the most unsurprising slide in the whole deck. We asked, what social media platforms do you use? And it was the usual suspects. WhatsApp was king, and then you also had Facebook, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Netflix. As I said, there was, I was hoping for a little surprise, but no, there was no surprise on that one. So essentially, we now get to, we're about to wrap up. So these are some of the areas that we would have, and this again, remember, this is just a snippet of what is available in the full report. We would be here all day if we had to go through the full report. So we've just tried to give you a bit of a teaser of what is to come when you avail yourself of the report. We also wanted to find out for that 10% of persons who do not use the internet, they have access, they have a mobile phone, but they do not use the internet. What are the barriers? And again, the top barrier this time for mobile was a lack of interest, and knowledge and skills were also a concern for persons. They indicated that if they had the knowledge or the skills, they would be more comfortable using the internet. So again, we see the themes of, I would say, the lack of interest, skills being an area that we want to address, and then affordability. An area that we have, we did a little bit on was security and privacy. We all know that while we are talking about the digital economy and we have spoken about all the excellent opportunities to be had, there is always a downside, and the downside is persons with ill intent. If you're not careful, anybody can be injured on the internet, because you have, the same way we have persons who commit crime in the real world, there are persons committing crime online. So security and privacy, very important that you understand how to take care of yourself, how to protect yourself and your children, and anybody else who probably, needs some guidance, how they remain safe while online. We did ask persons whether they had any cybersecurity or any privacy concerns in the last 3 months, and we hope that this is good news, or because 89% of persons said that no, they didn't have any of these incidents. I'm saying I hope it's good news, that meaning that we just didn't end up surveying the handful of people that didn't get hacked. But on the good news side, most persons knew what to do if they were compromised in any way. Most said that they would have reported it to their, say if it was at work, they would report it to a technical person, or they would change their password if necessary, delete the account and change it, or install protection against identity theft and other harms online. So again, it is good to see that persons have an idea what to do if they have a challenge online, but it's still an area that for us it's a nascent area, and we have a lot of work to do to ensure that persons understand, how to remain safe online and what to do if they have an unfortunate incident. That kind of is the main findings. I just wanted to point out that we did include a small appendix where we look at how the ICT is assisting the ECTEL member states in achieving the SDGs. There are a number of SDGs that are ICT related, and I won't go into them right here because, again, I would like you to get the report so you can read the appendix. But just to identify that is at least one of the uses for the report immediately. We can assist member governments in reporting where they are with regards to the SDGs. And what we will note is that we have made quite good progress in areas of things like coverage. As I said, we do not have a coverage problem. We don't have persons who, at least not significantly, where the reason that they cannot access the internet is because it's not available. Adoption, as we said, very high adoption, well over 90%, both at the household and individual level. We have no gender disparities in terms of persons' ability to access the internet. But we have key gaps. Skills have come up over and over, as well as affordability, as areas that we will have to pay close attention to as policy makers. We did not address waste here, but in the report we have a short section on e-waste. It's not yet a big problem for us, but as more and more devices are being imported and used, we are going to have to come up with ways of recycling and ensuring that e-waste is disposed safely. And as we said, based on the findings, the strategic priorities becomes now, how do we upskill persons, improve digital literacy, and equitable access for all. So just to kind of reinforce what we found when we dealt with the SDGs, based on everything that we have found, and as I said, this is just a really brief idea of the findings. One of the main areas that we want to look at for consideration, again, is, as we say, how do we ensure that mobile in particular, as I said, only 40% of persons say that they're using their mobile phone as their main source of getting onto the internet in terms of broadband. They would rather use Wi-Fi. And we know that that means there's some level of inconvenience. There could be, what happens if you're between point A and point B and there's an emergency. How do we bridge that skills gap? This is an area, as ICT regulators, this is not in our direct line of sight, but we are working in partnership, and we intend to work in partnership with other development partners to ensure that that area does not go unattended to. Cybersecurity. Again, you can't be building a digital economy if people don't feel safe online, or if people are constantly being sort of attacked, or you have persons spending an inordinate amount of money always trying to recover from some, difficult situation. So cybersecurity awareness is another area, as well as quality of service. And then we just want to again mention that what we are aiming for, I think that Chairman Shillingford ended, and I believe Imran also mentioned it, at the end of the day, we are always aiming for universal meaningful connectivity. Connectivity that is universal, meaning most everybody have access, but it's good enough, it's fast enough, so that everybody can participate in a meaningful way. And as we move forward, essentially we intend to share the findings throughout the ECTEL member states and with other development partners. So we will have a page on our website where we share the reports, some of the data that we have for those persons that would like to do their own analysis, and other bits about the digital inclusion process. The public will have access to that, and we have a QR code at the back for those persons who are in the room. If you want to, if you can scan that QR code, and you will get access to that report. And for those persons online, we will ensure that you are able to access the report. I believe we might put the QR code in the chat so that you are able to access the report, but it will be on our website, and that will be widely publicized. And then we will also have ongoing dialogues. As we said, now that we have identified some of the areas we need to put some more focus on, we will put our efforts on this, because this is meant to essentially guide us forward for the next few years to ensure that we are assisting our member states in ensuring that in order to have a successful digital economy, that all citizens are able to participate in a very meaningful way. I thank you for your patience. I know this was a longish presentation, but we really wanted you to get a very good feel for where we are right now and what we intend to do going forward. So if anybody have any questions, we will take questions at this time. For the people, okay, sorry. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody. For the persons online, you can type your questions into the chat, and our communications manager, Ms. Coretta Crooks-Charles, will sort of read out the questions. Or if we have anybody in the room who have any questions, we will entertain a few questions before we close off. Yes, the microphone, just. Yes, we have a microphone towards the back of the room to just make it easy for you to. Yes.
Hi, good morning. Joel Wallace from Digicel. Thank you very much for that insightful presentation. My question is, during your presentation, you mentioned that the affordable benchmark for broadband services was around 50 EC dollars. My question is, what service specifically are you referencing there? Is it mobile? Is it fixed line broadband? And also, how would you have arrived at that benchmark? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. Just to explain again what we mean. So, because broadband service has been essentially is now being viewed at the level of the United Nations as an essential service, the ITU and other development partners have done a lot of work, and they have determined that the aim is to get broadband service to cost no more than 2% of GNI per capita worldwide. And I must say the target is 2030, by 2030. So be it fixed broadband or mobile broadband, there should be an offering in the market. Now, we're not saying that all broadband plans should cost, 2% of GNI, but there should be an offering of somebody who, a low-income person, should be able to access broadband service and spend no more than 2% of the GNI per capita. This is a blunt instrument, because obviously GNI per capita is not the same for everybody in the country. It's an average number, but it is a benchmark that essentially we're all working towards. So the idea is to, even if we don't get there, we know that is where we need to be. So if you are very far away from that, then you need to look at the plans that are being offered in your country and see what can we do to ensure that we don't leave anybody behind. Because some people obviously will they will buy the Rolls Royce that is being offered, and that is one of the other things that we all often talk about. And I think Imran alluded to it. Broadband is sold by several plans. Every plan does not have to be a Rolls Royce. A Toyota Yaris is just good for somebody who wants to get from point A to point B. So we're looking at, is there a Toyota Yaris in it? So do we have a plan that can be somewhere about 2% of GNI per capita? But it is a UN target for essentially the world to try to achieve. Thank you. Okay.
Hello, yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I want to congratulate ECTEL on conducting this particular survey. I think you're in the right direction. However, I want to make a few comments on the findings, particularly as they relate to access to broadband and affordability. By the way, is anybody here from the Ministry of Public Utilities? Huh?
No.
Well, I just want to say my personal disappointment that nobody from the government is present. The issues, some of the issues that you have raised here have certain consequences in terms of the elucidation of incisive policy decisions that would take us forward. So I want to express my disappointment in the government for not being present at this. That does not mean that I did not support the government, by the way. I am a very staunch member of the government, and it is our government that have got you all here today. As a matter of fact, I am the godfather of ECTEL. Now, the question of the affordability, I hope that ECTEL is getting financial information from the current providers, because I could tell you that the providers are very tricky companies, particularly as we have only two here now, because you have a kind of duopolistic situation which has to be monitored very closely. I say that because of the fact that the reason why we are here today is because of the way in which the original service provider, that is Cable and Wireless, exploited us in the region. And so I would very much like to see the comparative analysis between what we have in the OECS and in the outside world. In other words, despite the fact that some of the costs have been reduced significantly, whether in fact we are still being exploited. And I'll tell you the reason why I'm saying so. When we first started this exercise of liberalization, we found that we were being exploited to an extent that was unbearable. For example, at the time, Cable and Wireless was making a profit of about £60 per head per customer in the world. But that in this part of the world, in this region, this sub-region of the OECS, they were making about 300 to 400% higher profits than the average of the world, particularly in places like St. Lucia, where they were making something like about 300 and something pounds per head. So that it is necessary for ECTEL not only to be comfortable with what you're getting now, but to make the comparative analysis outside, with outside sources, to see really whether we have made any improvements in the question of the exploitation. The other point that I want to point out or to guide you along is that the manner in which you relate to the service providers is very, very important. There are certain things which we could not foresee when we did the establish ECTEL and so on, particularly as it relates now to economic development. So that you find, for example, there was nothing in the legislation that related to our schools, for example, and the need for them to have particular instruments for their learning, and that should really have come under part of the bills which dealt with the universal service part, so that the governments themselves did not have to fork out money to pay for the students. That's just one example. So I think that in relation to what you have said in respect of the affordability for certain things, that should be taken into consideration, and that the universal service portion of the legislation should now be reviewed. The other thing that was worrying me was the question of the issue of the bundling. What has happened is that the service providers provide you with certain bundles, and one is not sure of the value to the customer or customers of different types of this bundling. And I would very much like ECTEL in her future research and analysis to find out where the types of bundles that are being not forced upon people but being offered, whether in fact there are advantages to be gained by certain people. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for your interventions, and I think thank you very much, Sir Calix George, for your interventions, and we will take them into consideration. The one area I would just mention is that in terms of the Universal Service Fund, the work on Universal Service Funds being available to provide service in schools, that work has started. It may not be in every member state, but in a number of the member states, there are Universal Service Fund projects that are aimed at ensuring that schools have access to broadband. So that based on the 3 points that you made, that one is well on its way. The other two we will take under consideration. Thank you, sir. Do we have any other questions or comments? Any online, Coretta, do we have any online questions?
Good morning. Yes, we do. We have a few, and I would just go through them. The first one is from Mr. Craig Nesty of the NTRC in the Commonwealth of Dominica, and his first question is, can you give us an indication of how much the survey costs, and why is it that the frequency of doing these surveys are so low? Is it that its costs prohibitive, or the usefulness of these surveys were not appreciated in the past? So that's the first question.
Okay, you want me to answer as you go, right?
Yes, please.
Yes. I think Mr. Nesty sort of answered his own question a little bit. These surveys are very costly because the the important thing to note is that in order to get the kind of robust data that you want, that's why you do it every few years, you literally have to go out into the field. We have 5 member states, and what some of us forget, those of us who are living here, I think in St. Lucia and Dominica, is that 3 of these 5 member states are actually multi-island states. So you end up with a lot of ground to cover in order to get the data. And so yes, it is quite cost prohibitive, and that is why we were very, in a way, lucky that when the CADI project was envisaged, the timing worked out that it was opportune for us to take advantage of the funding available to do this, to do the survey now. I do not have the number off the top of my head, but however, this was funded by the World Bank, so that number will be a public number. We can make that available to on the website. I don't want to say a number. I don't have the number in front of me, but as I said, it's part of the CADI project, so that number is available publicly for anybody who is interested. Yes, cost is a big consideration. We do understand the importance of such a survey because, again, you want to be working from, as I say, the real experience of persons on the ground as opposed to you just thinking about the 5 people you know and how they're interacting with ICTs. Thank you, Coretta.
Thanks, Ms. Fontenelle. So just to continue, Mr. Nessie also said, also were the limitations of having local e-commerce identified? Were there any questions that identified the impact of having policies for open APIs for the banking industry and the challenges local developers face in providing solutions that depend on local payment platforms?
Okay, so that would be round 2 of this exercise. So exercise 1 is to find out what exactly is going on in the market. And as I said, this is now a joint activity. So it's not just this digital inclusion survey, but also the financial inclusion survey done by the ECCB that would provide the information, the baseline for where are we with digital financial services. Because again, there is a pillar under the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project that is being spearheaded by the ECCB that is aimed at specifically addressing some of the difficulties that is faced with entrepreneurs when they're trying to transact or when they're trying to come up with some innovative way for us to be able to facilitate payments, e-payments or mobile payments in some way, shape, or form. So we would not have, this survey would not, it would not get into that level of detail. We now recognize, what it recognizes is that there is a problem because persons don't feel free to transact online. And so now we would have to say, okay, well, what are some of the concerns? We did ask some of the barriers, what are some of the concerns, and therefore start coming up with the solutions. But I think in particular, we want to recognize that anything to do with the payment system, this has to be done in conjunction with the central bank because they have the remit for payments for the ECCU region. So we always want to make sure that, you know, this would have to be done in partnership with the ECCB.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Fontenelle. Next question is from Mr. Dixon Oswala from the Digicel Group, and he says, would ECTEL be engaging with stakeholders, that is operators, on the findings of the survey?
Well, it is our intention, as we said, this is the first time we are sort of publicly launching and making it known to everybody that we have done this survey. Persons might have known we have done the survey, but they now know that we have the results and it's available. So yes, it's the whole point of it is not unto itself. The whole point is to give us the information we need when we have to engage with service providers or any other group. So the short answer is yes, but we will also say in the case of service providers, if there is anything that they want to discuss with us in more detail, as you know, we are always available to have conversations with service providers on anything, you know, that they want to discuss, because the report will be made available as well as the data. So once they maybe have an opportunity to go through it, if there is anything they want to discuss, service provider to regulator, then yes, we would be available to do that for sure.
Thanks, Ms. Fontenelle. And from Mr. Embert Charles, ECTEL's former managing director, he says, excellent and clear presentation. Hope the path to the policy-making process is equally clear. Then he asked, did the survey address any issues related to choice of service offerings, for example, bundling and the consumer decisions on productive use?
We would have asked persons essentially how they use the service and so on. Bundling is one of those things I'm not sure, we would have to, I don't want to say yes or no because we would need to know like what exactly we want to know about bundling. But just to speak about not the survey, but bundling itself. One of the main tenets with regards to the regulation of bundling is that any service that is part of a bundle must also be sold as a standalone offering. So under no circumstances should a customer be forced to buy a bundle because that's the only way they can get the service. They may be sold a bundle, and I think I like the language I think that Sir Khalid Judge used when he was speaking on that matter. They may be offered a bundle, they may be sold a bundle, and we probably also have to look at, are they clear on what they're buying? Are they clear that, yes, I could buy this as a bundle, but if I did not want the bundle, I could just as easily buy an individual service. But just to be clear, we did not get into a lot of details on the specific offerings for this, in terms of bundles specifically, but the issue of bundling, by law, every service that is part of a bundle, the customer should be able to buy that service standalone. You want to say anything? Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You all have analyzed
Yes.
the issue of bundling. ECTEL has to go into the belly of the bundling, because as it is there now, people do not know that probably do not know that it is optional that they can go into a bundle or not. And for the guidance of the ordinary individual, you should be able to tell them whether bundle X, Y, or Z is beneficial to them. Okay? Just give you an example. You have an old lady who lives in somewhere, but she may not necessarily want so and so and so. She just wants to use the food. But then you're forcing her to buy a bundle. Just as an example. So I think it is fundamental that ECTEL moves inside the belly of the bundling that are being offered now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So, Ms. Fontenelle, we have one more comment.
Yes.
And just to point out that the QR code has been placed in the Zoom room for persons to download the full report. And as mentioned by Ms. Fontenelle, it will be available on our social media platforms and website after the launch. So the final comment is from Mr. Kevin Swift from Liberty Caribbean Flow. And he says, this is a great initiative from ECTEL, but certainly in my view, just one point of a wider conversation that will condition the digital transformation and empowerment of the region. And he's looking forward to engagement with operators on the findings and ensuing action on policy recommendations.
Okay, so thank you for that comment from the Liberty Global Group. I think with that, unless we have any other questions in the room, again, I want to thank you for your patience with the relatively long presentation. And again, we want to ask everybody to engage with the report. As we indicated here, it is our intention to continue our engagement with stakeholders, service providers, and other persons. But also, if you have any questions or something that is unclear to you when you read the report, please feel free to send us an email, ectel@ectel.int, or to go to one of our social media handles or social media pages and submit your comments or your concerns, and we will assist you with that. Okay, thank you very much.